Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I just finished cutting up the beef fat to make into tallow, so I'll show you what that looks like in a second. I'm going to flip this around. I'll show you what I've been working on today. All right, so this is not parm. It's cut up garlic. I ended up with 2 containers from this giant rutabaga I cut up. Some carrots, green beans. This is for compost. I'm going to be baking those later. I actually took some because I don't have white pumpkin seeds, so I took some to dry to grow for next year. And then I have these. So we're going to take this. We're going to take my coffee. We're going to go sit down for a second. This is me moving things. Okay. So, I don't know who else is getting ready for Thanksgiving. A lot of people feel differently about the holiday, but my family celebrates. So this year I'm hosting, so I just wanted to get some vegetables ready ahead of time. We also had a ton of extra fat from this big cut of beef that Greg cut into steaks. So I just chopped it all up, threw it in our crock pot, and it's gonna cook on low for about 8 hours. It's only filled up about half of the crock pot, so I think it'll take less time than that. I'm gonna check it like once an hour and see how it's doing. I'm hoping, since it's about half a crock pot, maybe we'll get like a little jar of tallow, and then we'll have tallow and duck fat to just cook with, in addition to like the olive oil and canola oil we have. So that's pretty cool. So I'm gonna turn the camera back around. What I wanted to do was talk about some seed planting, and in order to do that, I think it would be important to show you how our main garden is set up. Also, hello to the one person watching right now. So hold on, let me spin this around. All right. Well, it'd probably help if it was in focus, huh? Oh dear. Oh, there you go. All right. So thinking of doing your garden. So this was the original design for the garden when we were basically constructing it last year. So the first thing we did was put up the fence last August. And that took a couple weekends. And then over the winter, we actually built all these raised beds. So you'll see here in the middle and on the edges are some beds that did not end up in there. So we did all the ones on the side. They're all 3 foot by 6 foot. I believe there's 7 on each side. And then we ended up just doing a 3 foot by 6 foot on this side and a 3 foot by 6 foot on this side. And there's Cat. So we just got tired of building raised beds. So we have this area in the middle that I'm gonna put mulch on, and is actually a really good spot for my fruit trees to be in the summer. But I'm still thinking of building these 9x2s maybe next year. So thinking of what I grew this year in 2021. So I started with one bed that was garlic. I planted that at the end of 2020. That grew in. And then we did 3 beds of potatoes. I believe this was herbs and green beans between the 2 of them, and some okra. We ended up having flowers in these at a point. This one I tried to do some brassicas in, but they just did not do well this year. And the same thing for this bed. We had some brassicas that I put in at a weird time of year, so I'm not going to do that. Over here we had 2 beds of peppers, a bed of eggplant, 2 beds of tomatoes, and then this was probably the worst bed. It had the worst raised bed mixture in it. So nothing really did that well until I put our last planting of green beans in. It did really well with the green beans. So I filled them all up over this past week with leaves, and we've also dispersed the garlic into other beds. Now I didn't put the garlic where the potatoes were, not because you can't plant garlic after potatoes, but I wanted to put it in the beds that really didn't have that much going on, so it'd be more nutrients. And I put a video on YouTube about that and my plans for that. So now thinking to next year, right? Okay, so number one, you want to think about what you planted this year. Then you want to think about what you want to plant next year. So there's this really good book I just read. It's called The 4-Season Harvest by Elliot Coleman. And in there, he actually has a good chart for, like, if you have this list of vegetables that you're growing, here's what you should not put in after them, and here's what you can put in after them. So it's definitely worth reading, especially if you're somewhere that does get 4 seasons or even 5 seasons. So think of what you want to do. So I have garlic dispersed. So like I said, I have a 3x6 over here. So I have a little bit of garlic in there, a little bit of garlic in this one. And then down where we had some okra and where we had eggplants, those two have garlic. And then one of the tomato beds and our brassica bed that didn't do very well also have garlic. So Greg came up with a good idea to split it up just to help with pest management. So where does that leave us for putting other stuff, right? So if we're gonna put garlic, general garlic there and here, I'm not gonna grow potatoes next to the garlic, right? So I was thinking of doing potatoes, where they get a little bit more light. I ended up buying 20 pounds of potatoes for next year, 4 different varieties. I will probably do 1 variety per bed, so we could even do like another one, and then just break it up so we can plant other stuff in the middle. What else are we gonna grow? So we have some garlic in here, which is actually on this side of the bed. In here, I'm gonna do my first flush of green beans. Down here, you can do onions. You can plant onions and garlic together. I wouldn't recommend planting in the same one every year, but every now and then it's okay. I did buy onion sets as well, but I'm gonna try them from seed again. So I'll put all our potatoes here. So what else can you put with the garlic in these 2 areas? Well, I can put some tomatoes where the eggplants were. I can put some peppers over here. This area ended up being like the shadiest area of the yard. So if you could think of this, that's over where our garage is. And then over here, we have a couple pawpaws. And they're in like an understory area. And here, we have all our blackberries. So this section, really like this section, is the shadiest spot all summer. So this I'm gonna save for lettuce. I'm gonna save this for maybe like a second round of green beans. And I'm gonna save this for some brassicas because I'm stubborn and I'm gonna still try to grow them. So I'm not gonna plant them right at the beginning of the season like I did this year. I'm actually gonna save them for the fall. So in the meanwhile, before, let's call this the brassica bed, before I put that in, I could grow carrots in here. I can grow root vegetables like beets, radishes. So that's my plan. And then like July or August or so, get a fall sowing of brassicas going. So then that leaves us 1, 2, 3 beds. These 4 are very sunny, and they didn't really have anything too obtrusive in there. I do have some lemon balm in this bed, which I'm hoping does take over. So I'm thinking of doing like tomatoes, peppers again, and really just treating this as kind of like a clockwise rotation of things, except I probably won't put potatoes here again. So that's my plan for this year. So if you're thinking of your own garden, you want to take into consideration how much light you have. So our yard is kind of oriented like on a tilt. So this is north, this is south. So it's like kind of at an angle. But it works because we have a lot of like big oaks and maples in the yard. So when the sun comes over the garden, like this area is in the sun all day pretty much. And then in the summer, there'll be like a brief shade here for like half an hour. And then it's in full sun again, like this whole direction until the sun goes down, which is great. It worked out really, really well. So when you're thinking of your own garden, you really want to plan for everything to be south facing. So as you notice the orientation of these beds, we did as much south facing as possible and only like a couple that are facing east west, just because the sunlight will go through this way for majority of the day. So that's one thing you want to consider. You want to consider also what you like to eat. So I like to do summer and winter squashes. Those actually might be grown in this area this year. I tried to grow them in another area by the chicken coop, which is like in this general direction, and they did not do very well. So I'm going to do them in the raised beds. What else do I like to grow other than like carrots, peppers, tomatoes? Already got those all set. Got the potatoes all set. Got the garlic all set. Pretty much, like, my main goal is to get as much of the squashes as possible next year. I have the onion sets coming in, so I know for sure we'll get onions. But really, really, really like stuff for storage. So more green beans, winter squashes for the winter. I love winter squash. Summer squashes, so we can add it to sauces. I don't even know if I'll do eggplant next year because I really didn't eat that much of it. Just kept giving it to the chickens. But really think of what you like to grow, what you like to eat, and just run with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a guess. I'm trying to remember. So this was the first year I actually took down notes of our harvest. I'll just flip this around. I really don't take like garden notes year to year. I have done more like visual documentation. So that's like one reason why I love Instagram, is because you can go back into your stuff and be like, oh, I posted that on that date. Awesome. So having this as like an additional documentation, like that's what works for me. Some people swear like you need a garden diary to be like, oh, you need to remind yourself, you only planted like 50 green bean plants last year and you really need to plant 75. And that works for some people. That's great. I used for the first time this year just like the notes app on my phone, and I was just like, oh, let me track what I did. Like this week I started the tomato and pepper starts. This week I started the onion starts. This week I planted corn outside. And it was actually very helpful for the corn and for the succession planting, for tracking that. So what I did this year with corn, we grew it on a different part of our property, but I did like one corn variety. I planted like every week or so to break it up. And I didn't listen to what people said, which was, don't plant popcorn and sweet corn next to each other. So all the popcorn came out fine, and the sweet corn was so starchy and nasty. So pretty much next year I'm growing like majority of sweet corn in this one area, and then like a little bit of popcorn in the back. And that popcorn's gonna be planted over where we tried to grow like melons and squash this year, because the corn actually did very well in that area of the yard. So having the notes out for that was helpful. And getting starts going really depends on like where you are in the country. So one thing you want to take into account is your latitude. So where we are in Massachusetts is on the 42nd parallel. I'm getting that right. And so that determines like how much sun you're going to get at different times a year. So that's important, in addition to like paying attention to your seasons. So I didn't realize until I really got into gardening like 10 years ago that winter really doesn't get bad here in Mass until like January to like mid-February is the worst month and a half here. That's where you get the most snow. That's where you get the coldest weather. When we have mild years, like we won't even get snow till like late January. And gardening really made me mindful of that. And the book I mentioned, The 4-Season Harvest, the guy who wrote it, so he lives on the 44th parallel in Maine. And the book talks about him like going to France along the 44th parallel. I don't know. But he had a really good idea. He's just like, okay, so here's how you build a cold frame, and here's when you can plant stuff for the cold frame to just like harvest it through the winter. And here's the months that, you know, are probably going to be the worst for it. Of course, like late January, February. So living in New England, and where we are in New England in Massachusetts, you know, that, you know, is pretty much the same here, right? They're a bit north of us, so Maine tends to get, you know, more intense and longer winters than we do. But it's really not that different. It's maybe a difference of like 2 weeks, if I'm remembering correctly, from like the last few years. So taking that into consideration. So what I usually do, so where I am in Mass, I usually like to get peppers and eggplants going first. Those I will start germinating seeds either in like the last week of January or the first couple weeks of February. I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head. I have it in my notes app, so I can post that when we get closer to seed starting this year. But that's when I start germinating, and you can do even like clip lights or get a little greenhouse and get those going. And tomatoes, because they just grow so fast. I even think I started them a little bit too early this year. So thinking of like this upcoming spring, I'm probably not going to start until March. I think I started them at like the end of February this past spring. But this upcoming spring, I'll probably start them like mid-March. That'll be fine. They'll grow fast. Other things I grow, I really like the way that I spaced it out this year. So I started with the peppers and eggplant. Then I waited a little bit, and I did tomatoes, and I did onions. And then as we were approaching like March-ish, like middle end of March, I started herbs. I started some stuff outside. In early April, we planted some sugar snap peas and lettuce outside, and they did fine in the raised bed. That was the second raised bed we actually filled with soil. So the first one was the garlic in the fall. I was like, we're getting this in. We need garlic. And then the second one was in the early spring. We actually filled it up and did sugar snap peas, and they did really good. I don't know if I'll grow sugar snap peas again, just because they vine everywhere, and I really only got enough to like snack on. So I'm probably not gonna spend my time on that. I'll probably spend my time doing like runner beans or pole beans. So thinking of like what you can start outside, what you can start inside. I mean, if it was early spring and I had the seeds at the time, because I didn't think ahead to buy them, I probably would have started some beets outside, carrots outside. They can be sown. I think the soil has to be like 50 degrees or warmer. But they can handle the changes in like air temperature, especially in early spring. You know, our nights are still cool in New England, but like the days can get really warm. So thinking of it like that and breaking it up. So I'll definitely share, you know, how we do that here over time. If you're in a similar climate, you know, if you could call it like the off gardening season is really, you know, if you don't have a cold frame, that's really like November to February. That's 3 months, dude. Like, it's not very long. And if you grow inside, okay, so if you're growing inside, you're growing during that time. If you have a cold frame, you're growing during that time, and it's really passive growing. So I think we're gonna build a cold frame for next year. just to see how it goes. So apparently with like a cold frame, you can get it started. I would say like a lot of things go in like August. So you're thinking like lettuces, you can do brassicas, you can do root veggies like beets, radishes, carrots. Get them going, and then as the temperatures start to drop, they're going to not grow as quickly. So that's why you can store like carrots in the ground during the winter, because they're not really growing, and because of the cold temperatures, it's converting a lot of the starches in those roots to sugars. So that's why they say, you know, if you're growing like kale or Brussels sprouts or carrots, you need to wait for a first frost, because that touch of cold converts those starches into sugars, so they taste better. You know what else you can do if you're growing it earlier in the year? Grow your stuff, take it out, throw it in your fridge for a few days in like one of your bottom drawers before you eat it. Same thing's gonna happen. So think about what you like to eat. You know, I really can't talk about like desert climates or those you know, unicorn climates where you can grow like year-round fun things, you know, like growing your pepper trees or growing your tomato vines are like 20 feet tall and they'll grow for like 10 years. If I could do that, I would. I was talking with Greg the other day and we're like, man, we should really move to one of those warm countries where we could do that, but that's some years down the line. So, yeah. Think of what you want. Think of what your season looks like. Definitely go on YouTube and find people who are growing in like your similar area. And if you're lucky and they've been making videos for years, you can go back and be like, oh, okay, so they made a video in like November because they're in Australia and they're getting ready for their winter and they're putting some brassicas in because it's not going to be like walking on the sun for a few months. Do that, gather that. I mean, most of the information I've learned have come from books, watching YouTube videos, Facebook groups, sort of, but not like the biggest fan of the Facebook groups for that. Although they're good places to ask questions. So that's a good one. Think of what kind of seeds you want. I mean, I was just talking on my story yesterday on how I like to experiment with different seeds. But like, you don't have to. You can go to, I don't know if anyone has like Ocean State Job Lot near you. I went there in the spring and they had 65-cent seed packets. You're on a budget, you want to get some seeds and you don't want to pay these companies whatever for shipping. You can go to these like inexpensive stores and get it. I was just talking about, I have a local food store year-round because they're great and I love the seed store, but they sell like 85-cent seed packets. So if I run out of carrots or something, I can just go there and grab it. I don't care if I get like the fancy carrots. I have really liked, they're called like Dragon Purple. Those are pretty good. But this year I actually grew like generic orange carrots. I think they're like Danvers or Nantes Long. I don't know, there's some generic orange carrot I got from the store for like the first time. They're great. They're sweet. They grew really good. And I've grown like every color carrot so far. And I was just like, wow, like these orange carrots actually can taste good. You know, I was just so like put off by like these flavorless carrots you get from the store. Yeah, it turns out there's all these other kinds of orange carrots you can try. So just picking it up from the stores, like in like the seasons, stores expect people to be looking for seeds. So if you wanted to go that route, I mean, you can get like radishes, beets, beans, corn, lettuce, pretty much like anything you could grow, except for wheat. I think you'd probably have to buy that in bulk somewhere. Like you can get like generic forms of those from these stores in the spring. Or if you're a nerd, right now in the fall, I've been getting like booklets left and right, emails left and right about seed companies just restocking. And like seed companies that I follow that I enjoy, like their quality of stock, like they have reliable seed stock. It's always good condition when I get it. They have some cool varieties that I can try. So I like to read stock at this time because I can look at different varieties and get different ones that I want. But you don't have to do that. I mean, you can just get bulk seeds from, even like a Tractor Supply in the spring. They have like fruit bushes, seeds, all this good stuff. If you want to get like specialty items, that's where you really want to look online. So, yesterday I just did like a big Am I Gardener order. I got some potatoes from Maine Potato Lady. I've been getting potatoes from there for like 6 years now? No. How long did I live there? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, like 6 years now. And, they're good. And we're figuring out what kind of potatoes we like that are like go-to potatoes. This year might honestly be our last year to do like a bulk variety seed order. So there's a cat on the phone. Hello. But even, getting seeds from the store, knowing when to try them, experimenting. People told me, like, oh, it's too early in the year to start seeds. It's too early in the year to direct sow in the ground. Oh, it's too late in the year to do this. Oh, you really need to be careful with how many seeds that you're sowing or how many starts you're, going with. You're going to get too much food. No. I love oversowing. I think the idea of being conservative with your seed use is kind of ridiculous, especially for like people who are new gardeners. Overseed, if you can afford to buy like another 65-cent seed packet if you fuck up, go get one. I love to heavily sow okra, lettuce, carrots, all those good like root veggies with the little tiny seeds. Guess what? You can thin them out. You can use those sprouts in salads or stir fries. It's not going to waste. And, just experiment every year. I get it. I've been broke and had to be like very mindful about how many seeds I use. But now, you know more. The more that you grow stuff, the more that you experiment. We've only been at this location a little over a year now. So the whole last year was just like figuring out like, oh, how is the seasons a little bit different from where we lived before? We don't live very far from where we used to live before, and the seasons are totally different here because we're just like geographically in a different type of orientation from like rivers and like mountains in the area. And that really changed our like own little like microclimate in our backyard. Even growing in my backyard versus growing in my front yard, totally different from each other. It gets different sunlight. It gets different type of soil. The people who own the house before us, they brought in their own soil. It's so weird. Around our house, they put in this like really, really nice soil because they love their grass. And our whole backyard is just absolute shit. So that's why I built the raised beds to begin with instead of just growing in the ground like I've usually done. So there's even different soil in different parts of our property. As we get closer to our meadow, like our whole yard over there is just moss. There's mushrooms that just come up everywhere because there's trees all over the place. Really cool if you're thinking about like different areas. Even if you're growing like the place you have to grow is right next to your house. If you're south facing, right? And if it happens to be an area that's not super windy, you can like push your zone and grow stuff that's more like heat loving next to your house. I just got on YouTube. His name is, he like changed his YouTube title recently. But if you go on YouTube and you look up David the Good, he talks a lot about zone pushing and growing like fruit trees and stuff, which I love because I grow fruit trees. I just ripped out all of our landscaping this year because it was nasty. It was overgrown. There's thistle everywhere. I was like, I don't know how to prune any of this. It's coming out. I replaced it with lingonberries and gooseberries. That is our landscaping around our house, our fruit bushes. Whenever we decide to sell this place, we either super like tanked our house value by all the vegetable stuff we're doing, or making it go up. I don't know. Regardless, right? You can put stuff you can eat around your house. You don't have to, worry about absolute like sunniest part of your yard. You can grow in the shade. If it gets some sunlight or filtered sunlight during the day, you can grow in there. So think about what you like to eat. Think about your climate. Think about when you want to get your seeds. If you want like absolute freshest seeds, absolute, choice in variety, that's the time of year to do it. But if you don't care, you want to just get some generic stuff, wait till the spring. Everywhere's going to restock in like the big box stores. You'll be all set. I mean, if you went to the stores right now in New England, pretty much what everyone's selling are bulbs, like flower bulbs for next year. When it gets closer to, in Mass, usually it's like beginning of April, mid-April. That's when the big box stores are like, hey, here's asparagus, strawberries, grapes. Oh, you want to do like different kinds of blackberries, raspberries? Here you go. Here's some little starts you can put in. Here are some starts for your garden. Here are the like seeds, right? I don't like waiting for that. I've done that. I don't like waiting for it. It's so much easier and less like stressful for me to get starts going in my house, even if it's under a clip light, than waiting till almost May to start getting things. For me and the way that I grow, that's too late for me. Other people, how many people do you know who are like, oh, I go to this big box store, I get my tomato for the year, grow like 2 tomato plants. I'm going to grow my basil. I'm good. That's my garden for the year. And that's great. That works for so many people. I like to accrue food for storage. So that's why I'm thinking more of like 365 planting. This is why I'm getting mushroom logs going. I just posted a video on YouTube inoculating some logs. So like around this time next year, we'll get some mushrooms. This is why we have our little greenhouse in the garage, which I just went through, and we had enough greens for a little stir fry. It was great. Just some Swiss chard and spinach and carrot tops. It was awesome. I was so hyped on it. I'm going to put some other stuff growing in there. I'll show everyone. Probably get to it like on the weekend or something. I have like 24 gallons of eggs in our basement for the winter. We don't eat that many eggs. I like having the food storage. We have like 2 bins of potatoes to go through. We have all our garlic. We have a very, very small onion harvest. Next year I'm hoping a bigger one. So this is why I'm thinking 365 growing. And that's not for everybody. I mean, you grow for what you want. I know someone who only grows tomatoes all year. That's it. They have like this one specific tomato variety that they like. And I've tried it and it's super good. But they grow like, let's say it's like 6 tomato plants. But they're like really good about fertilizing. They're good about pruning it and keeping an eye on it. And then they just get like this horde of tomatoes. So you can just make some sauce in the winter. And they love it. And that's the range of their gardening every year. And I was so hyped on it. I'm like, can I please have some sauce that you made? So think of how much you want to do and doing what is within your capacity also. Because I also know people who either grow stuff or maybe raise animals that's beyond their like limit of capacity to like appropriately, make sure stuff is clean, fed, watered, and you don't want to end up that. So I like to do a little bit at a time, and even into the point where I have like, what's it, 16, our main garden, 16 raised beds, and building that. It's not something you do overnight, okay? This is like 10 years in the making of getting to this point. Getting the property you can do it on and practicing what is in your capacity until that point. There's so many years we were living in apartments, and I was just container growing in the summer, just, some peppers. I remember this one year we were living in a downtown city area, and we were just surrounded by brick buildings, but we couldn't use like the yard that our apartment was in, but we could use the staircase. So I just had pots going up the staircase of peppers. And that's all I grew that year was hot peppers. It was awesome. They came out so good. Hot peppers love heat. Arguably, they do better in containers. I'm experimenting. So like this year we grew a bunch of peppers in raised beds and we got like a shit ton of peppers. And I was happy with it. It was fine. But I think when we were growing and we had all this extra like ambient heat from these brick buildings, they were growing the peppers in containers and it was like pretty dry constantly and their roots were getting hot because the containers were black. Those peppers loved it. And we also got like a huge harvest. So, you know, do what you can with what you have. What I'm thinking of after this big seed order, I just have like a couple more things I'll be growing in the garage. I don't know about leeks. I was considering it. I was going to do some more carrots inside. Bush green beans. I forgot what I got, some generic bush green bean variety. And then I was going to give a try at growing broccoli. Just, you know, in a container next to the greenhouse, so it's getting not like the light over it, but just like light next to it. So I want to take advantage of that. Hi, boo-boo. And I mean, at this point, it's almost December, and I'll probably be getting peppers going again at the end of January. And I'm gonna be, I have some mushrooms coming in, so I'm gonna grow mushrooms inside over the next couple months. That's really just 2 months where I'm just kind of passively growing stuff. I got like a whole salad in my garage right now I could go pick. I planted some more greens. I think it was like 2 days ago. I think it was 2 more kinds of lettuce and like a darker boar kale, which is like that curly kale you find at the grocery store. And it's pretty easy. I mean, I even have like a little hydro kit I've used when I lived in apartments where, I don't know, it's like the size of an air fryer. It's not huge. You can put it on your counter, grow some herbs. You just want some herbs for your eggs in the morning or when you're cooking. I grew some green beans in there 2 years ago before we lived at this property. And then there's one more thing I tried to do in there. I think I tried to do like a very short pepper plant, but it wasn't like a small variety of pepper. You could do like a Tom Thumb tomato right now. Those things I hear only get like a foot tall, and you'll get like little cherry tomatoes off them. So like that's something you do in a small hydro kit. You can grow stuff in your windows if you're somewhere that's warm. You can just I forget what it's called, but it's kind of like a hanging shelf that like hangs against your window. And I know someone who does that every year here, even in New England, even with like next to the window being cold, and they grow herbs all winter. There's so many things you can do. So that's my 2 cents on seed growing. And I think it might be, I'm talking for a minute. I think it might be time for me to go because I realized as I was cutting up all our stuff, you can see kind of in the background here, I have no serving dishes. I have like 1 serving dish, all the other ones have like broken or have gone missing. So I need to go to the store and go get some. So Jeff, thank you for joining me today on my rant. Everyone else, if you're catching this at a later point, I hope this is helpful at all. And I hope everyone has a good turkey day and gets some good food this week and gets to see some people you like to be around. If you want, I just posted our mushroom inoculation video on YouTube. It's pretty cool, pretty simple process. I just followed the directions from North Spore Mushrooms, and I'll show you that they're, this is not an advertisement for them. They're just like a good mushroom company that's close to me. So definitely check it out, or if you haven't seen anything on our YouTube yet, if you go to our full videos, that's like all our videos. And there's also a playlist of shorts, which is just like stuff from TikTok or Instagram. So have a good day. We'll see you next week.